You know, the way you said that, you insinuated I wasn't smart enough, that I should have known that.
You should have. You helped me once.
Okay, that's enough of that question. That was a stupid question. Hi, I'm Ted. This is my brother Jason. We're the owners of Really Cheap Floors, which can be found at reallycheapfloors.com if you're wondering. We're doing something new here. We're sitting down and we're going to be answering questions that we have received from our customers. Jason and I have worked in the business almost our entire lives. Our parents bought the business in 1973. I was 5, Jason was 3. Even though he looks older, he's really not. He's younger than I am. And we've done just about every job that needs to be done in a family floor covering store over the last almost 50 years, I guess. So we've heard a lot of questions. More importantly, we've answered a lot of questions. Jason came up through the installation side, so I don't think there's an installation question that we've been asked that he can't answer. Certainly if it's maybe about a newer product or a new technique, he might have to do a little research, but he knows what he's talking about. So we're excited today, aren't we excited?
Oh yeah, we're ready for this.
Yeah, we're excited. We've been given this really long list of questions, and it's interesting as we went through them and decided, okay, which one's best for Jason to answer and which one's best for me. Really, none of them are for me. They're about all for Jason because they require intelligence and thought. So we might as well get started.
I'm ready.
You're ready. All right, our first question. Wormholes are terrible, right? Probably just my ignorance, but it sounds like a weakened wood structure.
It isn't a weakened wood structure. Wormholes are a natural thing that happens in all growing trees. As the tree grows, the worms get in them, they eat through. When they cut the boards, then they show the wormholes in the wood. Some people get the boards and think they have worms in their wood, which they don't, because they can't live through the process of the drying and the finishing and all that. But you will see the wormholes in a cabin grade, in the lower grades of wood, where you won't see them in the first qualities.
So wormholes are one example of what we would call natural defects.
Yes.
Knots, mineral streaks, small season checks. Those are what we're going to get. And when a company grades wood, they essentially will have 3 or 4 different grades, and each grade has different allowances.
Yes.
Most companies are not going to allow wormhole in anything but the cabin grade. So just realize, if you're going to get cabin grade, you may get wormholes. And it tends to run in batches. You'll see batches that has almost none, and you'll see batches that half of it's wormy.
And it does. You'll see some boards that look like you held them up and shot them with a shotgun.
Right.
Then you may get a board that just has 1 or 2 and you can hardly notice it. It's just according to the look of the draw.
And interestingly enough, a lot of customers really like it.
Yes, it gives it great character if you're doing like a cabin. They look great. Some people hate them, but that's part of the beast.
You used to hear a lot about people wanting to buy wormy chestnut paneling,
Right.
and it was worth bukus of money. There's very little of it.
Yeah.
So worms can make it more valuable, but that's up to the customer. It's wherever you want. All right, next question. What is a vapor barrier, and when should I use one? That's actually 2 questions.
It is.
Yeah, it is 2 questions.
Vapor barrier. Vapor barrier is something you would use if you were floating a engineered floor on a concrete slab. You never need to use a vapor barrier if you're doing it over a plywood. If you're doing something over plywood, you wind up nailing it anyway. But a vapor barrier is a cushion with a plastic on top of it, and they overlap so it keeps all the moisture from coming out of the concrete up into your wood.
So what happens if you use a vapor barrier over wood?
You don't really need to, because in my years of experience, if I'm going over a wood subfloor, I'd rather nail it anyway.
Right.
It's much cheaper one way to install it that way. Plus, I think it's just a more sturdy floor.
Now, you would use a vapor barrier in like a 15-pound felt, but it's really not a vapor barrier.
No.
It's called that, but it's really there to grease the nails so they don't squeak later.
People think that felt paper is a moisture barrier because they see people put it on their roofs before they put their shingles. But that has nothing to do. You put a piece of felt in water, and it's going to soak. The water's going to go all the way through it in time.
Yeah.
Plus, when you nail through the felt paper, you're putting a million nail holes in it, which doesn't do anything.
Unless it was self-sealing, right. So one of the problems, reason we don't use a vapor barrier, a real vapor barrier over wood is because we need moisture to migrate, okay? If it's coming up through the bottom, it needs to keep going. And if you put a vapor barrier over a piece of plywood, that moisture is going to be trapped there, and over time, you're going to get a rotten floor.
Oh, yeah.
You're much better off. Let's get that moisture through there. So if we're putting down a floor if we're floating an engineered floor, we would use a pad that does not have a vapor barrier, or we wouldn't tape the joints. That's what you do in some of the cases. Now, if you are going over concrete floor, you would always tape that joint. Some of them are self-adhesive.
Right,
and
most
you
of
pull
them overlap and seal
right,
themselves.
right. So that's our story on that. Okay.
Okay, Ted, here's a question for you. How much wood do I need to install a floor?
Well, it depends on the wood that you're buying, to be honest with you. This is a tough question, and the answer is going to be a little lengthy, not because I want you to know how much I know, but because I want you to know enough to make a good decision, okay? If I am putting wood in my house and I want to look pretty high end, then I'm probably going to buy fairly high end wood. Maybe I buy a first quality floor. First quality floors will almost never run over 3% waste, okay? Because when we talk about waste, we're talking about what are we throwing in the burn pile. All right, so if I'm installing, you always do the great room first. So if I'm doing my great room and I see some boards that I don't want to use, maybe they've got a little bit more color in them, maybe they're a little bit shorter, I don't want nothing but long ones, I can take those boards, move them into the bedroom. If I don't want them in the bedroom, I can put them in the closet, okay? So if I'm doing a whole house, my waste is much lower, is a much lower percentage than it is if I'm just doing one room, okay? If I'm just doing my living room, well, now those boards that I don't want to use in the living room go into the burn pile. But if I'm doing the whole house, I'm going to use almost every one of those. So whole house, very little waste. Even if we come down into a cabin grade, one of the things we run into with cabin grade is there's going to be 5% waste. Can you get by with less? You can, but we want you to figure 5%. If you are particular, if your wife is particular, if you have a particular customer, either A, buy a higher percentage, or B, don't buy cabin grade wood, okay? Because cabin's what's going to be in that box. We prefer people not to try to grade cabin and make it a better product than it is, right? I mean, if you want a better product, buy it. And if you've got an installer involved, don't even think about buying cabin grade wood and say, I want you to throw out all the shorts. I want you to throw out all the wormholes. Installers are not in the grading business. They're in the installation business, okay? But to go back, how much wood do I need to install a floor? If I'm buying cabin grade and I'm doing the whole house, I think 5% is enough. Again, we're going to put those coals in the closets. You might get by with 3 or 4 if you're diligent, and take care of that. What would you add to that?
The only thing I would add, the salespeople get asked a lot, well, can I just buy more cabin grade and have it look like a first quality? We say no.
No, because every board was put in there for a reason.
If you want a first quality floor, you should buy a first quality floor.
Right. I agree. Now, we do sometimes offer builder grade floors that are between the two, and honestly, our builder, the company we work with that makes most of our wood, their first quality is so highly graded, so selective, that the builder is better than most companies' first quality.
Yeah.
I really like their builder. We've had some issues in the past with some having too much coal in it, but I think we've got all that cleaned up now. Great value, our builder grade is, just for that. If you want first quality floor, but you don't want to pay $5 a foot, you might want to look into our builder.
Yeah.
All right, you ready for the next one, Jason?
I'm ready.
Okay, all right, here's a softball question for you. A lot of professionals say leave an expansion gap that is the thickness of your material. If you lay 3/4 of an inch thick hardwood, do you leave a 3/4 inch gap?
No, I don't think you need a 3/4 inch gap. I think you need at least a 1/4 inch gap. If you can leave more, I think you leave more. If you leave 1/4 inch around your whole house and it has growed to the walls in that, you're having a moisture problem anyway.
Right.
If I can leave a 1/2 inch where my trim will cover it, I will, but 1/4 inch around the whole perimeter should be satisfactory.
And something else to consider, that's not an expansion gap, it's also a contraction gap. That floor can also shrink a little.
Yeah.
you know, depending on what time of year you're installing it, what the conditions are in the house, and that's a whole nother question or a whole video blog there, moisture in wood. But so if you've got it 3/4 of an inch and you put down a baseboard that's what, 5/8 of an inch thick?
Yeah.
If it shrinks more than 1/8 of an inch, you're gonna have a crack around there.
And then you're gonna put quarter round, and everybody doesn't want that.
Right, so don't leave 3/4 too much. Okay, Jason, does it matter if you put the tongue or the groove side against the wall? I've seen people say that you nail into the groove. What's going on with that?
No, you can't nail into the groove side of the wood. Here's the piece of wood, here's the groove, here's the tongue. You always put the groove side against the wall and nail into the groove. If we try to nail in here, the nail doesn't set, and then the tug won't go in the next one. And even if you did try it, you're going to get so many squeaks, you're going to rip your floor up anyway. So always nail into the tongue side.
Well, while we're covering this, Mr. Smarty Pants,
Okay.
so I've got a bay window over here. You know, we started on this wall, we went this way. Now I've got to come back and put this bay window in, or a room. How do I get this tongue going the right direction? How do I do that?
Well, if you're smart enough, they make splines that are a wider tongue, and you put in the groove side, nail it in, and then you have tongues on both sides of the boards, and you can go both directions.
You know, the way you said that, you insinuated I wasn't smart enough, that I should have known that.
You should have. You helped me once.
Okay, that's enough of that question. That was a stupid question. Okay, Ted, finally a question I get to
Here
answer.
you go, Ted.
Oh, you want to ask? Okay,
Yeah,
you can
here
ask
you
it.
go.
Okay, fine then.
I'm about to order either Mills River Cortec or the Florte Pro 6 series. The prices are very similar. Any recommendations or preferences for a townhouse?
Well,
You may want to tell them what the differences are too.
okay. Mills River from Cortec and the Florte Pro Series 7 Nobility. They're pretty different. When we're looking at LVP, the first way that we use to compare them is the thickness of the wear layer. Common numbers are 8, 12, 20. We're starting to see some 30s now. We don't offer anything under a 12 mil anymore. There's just not enough price separation to validate. So we start at a 12 and then we quickly go to a 20. Mills River is a 20 mil commodity type product. It's very well made. It has some awesome colors in it. The only thing it doesn't have a lot of bells and whistles. 2-3 years ago, bells and whistles cost you a lot. Things like high definition graphics. What's the feel a knot, see a knot? That
Registered and embossed.
registered embossed. I love registered embossed. Aluminum oxide wear layers. Okay, so Mills River is a 20 mil. It does have an enhanced finish as far as the hardness and the durability of it. But the Florte Nobility is pretty much an all-star. It does have the registered embossed. It does have the high definition graphics. It has aluminum oxide wear layer. I love an aluminum oxide wear layer. If you remember the old commercials, how many licks does it take to get to the center of the Tootsie Roll Pop? That's sort of what aluminum oxide does one. How many scratches, how many swipes with an SOS pad, or how many swipes with a Brillo pad does it take to...
3, don't it?
3?
Yeah, then you crunch it.
No, we're talking about the floor.
Oh, okay.
Good old boy, anyway. Aluminum oxide makes a floor extremely scratch resistant. The neat thing now, I think there's only about $1 difference between the Mills River and the Nobility. Not a big difference, you know, on an 800-foot order, it's $800. Not a big difference when you look at that. Another thing that Jason likes, the Nobility has that, what's it called, drop-in-place technology?
It's just the drop lock on the end joints. It's much easier to install.
Why don't you tell us why it's easier to install there, Mr.
It's
Smarty Pants?
easier to install because when you have on the end joints, on the Mills River, you have to lock the end joints and the side joints. On the
So you do one at a time.
Nobilities, you just put the long side joint in, and the end joints just fall right down in place, and you just tap and...
That floor that we laid in Dalton, we did that 1,000, how long did it take us to do 1,200 feet? 3 hours?
3 to 4 hours.
Yeah, now
Wide
great.
open room. But
And granted, it was wide open. We weren't doing a lot of coffee, but it literally, it just popped into place. So Mills River or Nobility, Mills River is a great product, okay? It's a quality product, and it's a great value. If you want some bells and whistles, Nobility offers pretty much all of them at very little upgrade. Recommendation or preference for a townhouse, assuming the townhouse is a rental, I would probably save my money and put the Mills River in it, okay? Rentals, everybody has a rental for one reason, it's to make money. And the best way to make money is to save money. That's where we start. And that's really what we do here at Really Cheap Floors. We are, I'm probably 60, 70% of our business is repeat buyers. People that are, with the money that they save is money they get to keep in their pocket. And we're really good at that. All right, Jason, what kind of underlayment should our customers use for their engineered floors?
It's according to what we're installing it over.
Well, maybe you should tell us that.
Well, if we're doing an installation over a plywood floor, you just need a 15-pound felt paper. This keeps it from squeaking. That's all the felt paper does. We covered this before. Some people think it's a moisture barrier, but it's just for squeaks in the wood. If I am putting it over a concrete floor, we should use a foam underlayment that has a moisture barrier with it.
What about a sound deadener? Can I use sound deadener in there?
You can. Some of your underlayments, Shaw has a good one. I cannot think of the name off the top of my head.
That one that kind of snaps together?
Yeah, it kind of snaps together, but it has a real dense foam with, it looks like an aluminum foil top on it. Very, very good. So when you use a denser underlayment, some people say, well, when I walk across it, it sounds like it echoes. The echo is because you used a cheap underlayment.
Right. Yeah.
A lot of people think because laminates always were loud, because everybody always used a cheap underlayment. Use a good underlayment and it takes away that weird sound.
Something else that puts that sound in there, if you have a floor that's not perfectly level. I mean, face it, the sound is created by hollow, by air spots, and whether it's because you're using a foamier, less dense underlayment, or it's because you have, you know, low spots in your floor, that's going to cause that. And that's why, Jason,
and if you have them low spots, if you
quit interrupting.
If you catch them early enough, fill them in, make them flatter, and you won't have them dead.
Yeah, filled in. Well, that's why when people always ask us, you know, should I float my floor, nail it, or glue it? If you can nail a floor, always nail it, no exceptions. One, it's a lot cheaper because some of these underlayments are 40, 50 cents a foot, and tar paper's next to nothing, okay? Always nail a floor, no exceptions. If you can nail it, nail it. Second of all, if you can't nail it, if you're on concrete, glue it. It's messy, it's annoying, glue's not cheap, but you will get a better install with a glued down wood floor than you do with a floating floor.
And it sounds better.
It sounds better. Floating is last resort. You know, we talked a little bit about expansion room, okay? A glued down or a nailed down floor is going to expand less than a floating floor because a floating floor doesn't tie it down. So nail, glue, float. Just float. If you've got a floor that, hey, it's going to cost more to fix the floor and get it smooth and get it right than it is to buy the floor, then you float it and you accept that. But otherwise, don't float floors unless you don't have a choice.
You skipped one.
I skipped one because who's reading these, me or you?
Well, if you're going to read them, that's
Okay. Would you recommend installing luxury vinyl on top of existing solid hardwood if they're in good condition? What, the existing hardwood? Oh, okay. If the existing hardwood's in good condition, or would it trap moisture from the hardwood?
Well, that's a good question.
Well, thank you, Jason.
Because I did this at my own house. I had solid hardwood down, been down for years. You know, kids grew up on it, 15, 20-year-old. Well, I didn't want to move out of my house to refinish my floors. So we put the LVP, the luxury vinyl plank, over top of it.
So you have kids that are almost 30. You're quite old, aren't you?
I do.
Good talk.
But no, if your wood is in good shape, good, nice and flat, there's no problem in just laying it right over it. And say 20 years down the road, somebody buys your house or you decide to go back to wood, you can pull it up and refinish it and it does nothing to it.
Okay, while you're talking about refinishing, here's one of my favorite questions to answer. And we're gonna run these two questions together. How many times can I sand my engineered hardwood floors? Okay, I'm gonna give you
Good
my.
question.
I'm gonna give you my opinion first. All right, right here is an engineered floor. Usually people ask the question, how many times can I refinish this engineered floor? Okay, because the reason they're asking that is they've been to a store that is part of their sales pitch. Oh, this floor can be sanded 7 times. That's not true. This floor can be refinished 1,000,000 times. While it sounds like rhetoric, it's really not. When we refinish a floor, we're not sanding any of the wood. We're scuffing this top to make it smooth, and then we vacuum it or wipe it down, and then we apply another coat of finish. There's no sanding of the wood. We're not touching the wood at all. So we can do that 1,000,000 times. And what happens over time is floors, 2 things can happen to a wood floor. It can get dented, which you get when you drop a bowling ball on there, okay? Or abrasive wear in the finish. Usually it's, in the old days it was always abrasive wear. With the new aluminum oxide finishes, you really don't have abrasive wear anymore. In the old days, in the traffic pattern where you walked, where you walked straight through your living room, over time you would get a pattern there, a change in appearance due to loss of gloss level. That sounded pretty smart, didn't it?
It did.
It did, okay. And so it wouldn't be a problem if it was like that everywhere, but where you walked, you had that change in gloss level, and over here where you didn't walk, you didn't. It still looked pristine. So it was that change that people think, hey, I need to fix my floor. You really don't get that anymore with aluminum oxide. If you do, how many times can you refinish that floor? 1,000,000. If you want to, keep refinishing it. Now, drop a bowling ball in there and you've got a dent in it. How many times can you sand this floor? Well, it kind of depends on how deep you're going to sand it, okay? If you've got little bitty dents, then you can probably sand those out, because this particular floor is one of our Somerset offerings. It has an 1/8 of an inch hardwood top on it. So if you wanted to shave a 1/16 of an inch off of that, you can do that once. If you do it again, you're going to have a problem.
Yep.
Don't sand engineered floors, okay? There's really no reason to, right?
No, I mean, if you had to on some of these with the thicker tops, you could do one sanding. If I had a 3/8 engineered, I wouldn't touch them with the sander. One mistake, you have to rip the whole floor out.
Yeah. Really, if you want to address that now, buy a floor that doesn't dent easily. Some of your cheaper floors, the 3/8, you'll see they only use maybe 3 layers of wood. The best, you won't find more than 5 in any of the 3/8. But they tend to use softer materials in those cores. If you're not familiar with our Somerset 1/2 inch products, they're all 8-ply, but they're hardwood core. And what that means is when you drop something on it, this core is so hard it doesn't dent. You go with some of those cheap Chinese floors that are at your box stores, you drop anything on them and they dent. And the dent can be from a subpar wood on top. They'll call it a maple, but it's actually a Siberian larch, or some of these other species. They're just soft. So you'll have a soft top, or you can have that soft core. If you'll buy a quality floor to begin with, denting shouldn't be an issue, and you won't have to worry about sanding.
You know another thing on the sanding and finishing?
Why don't you tell me?
A lot of times at really cheap floors, you can get a floor cheaper and replace it cheaper than you can get it sanded and finished.
Say, that's a good idea.
That is a good idea.
Nice thinking, Jason. What's next? Let's see. Oh, we'll just hint on that real quick. My 3/8 inch engineered floors has some spots with little dents. What's your thoughts on sanding it? Don't?
Don't.
Okay, good
Don't
talk.
sand the 3/8 floor.
All right, here's a little interesting one. I bought a 1940s house, and when I pulled up the carpet, it had 1x4s butted together with no tongue groove, simply nailed to the floor joist with no subfloor. I'm installing a new wood floor. Can I use the existing 1x4s as my subfloor, or do I need to remove all that and install sheets of plywood?
You can lay flooring over this, but it would have to be a 3/4 solid. I wouldn't recommend putting any kind of engineered over this without putting another layer of plywood down on top of it. But yes, you could do a 3/4 solid without having any problems.
That was a good answer.
Yeah,
that was well thought out, wasn't it? Yeah. At really cheap floors, whether it's our Orlando store, Dalton store, Murphy store, do you make recommendations for selecting installers?
I don't. We only have one store, which is here in Murphy, our home location, that we have in-house installers. Well, our own contractors that we've used for years. Other than that, we really don't know a lot of installers outside of this area.
Right. Now, in the Orlando store and the Dalton store, they do have a list of installers they've worked with over time. You know, the longer they've worked with them, the more they know about them, the more secure they feel in recommending them. I know for certain if they have a problem with one, they get bad feedback, they don't recommend that installer anymore. So while they don't work for us, and you know, we have no liability there, and we don't want to say too much about them because they don't work for us, we can help you find those. Well, guys, thanks for bearing with us today. This is our first podcast. Both of us have been in this business over 40 years, but we've never done this. We're excited about sharing what we know. We've been blessed to have each of us to have a long career in this business. I've been in sales and purchasing. He's been in installation and sales. And I don't think there's two brothers that know a whole lot more than we do in the U.S. We love to get your questions.
If they do, we wouldn't admit it.
No, we would never own up to it. If you have a question you would like to see us add to this, feel free. You can email it to Jason@reallycheapfloors or Ted@reallycheapfloors.com. Not only will we go ahead and answer your question at that time, but we'll also add it to our list for the next podcast and try to expound on it. I'm not a very good typer. I didn't get typing in high school. That tells you how old I am. So sometimes I send those questions over to Jason. He's a better typist.
That should do it.
That should do it. Thanks.